Dave. 1.
In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter, long, long ago.
Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. You will therefore permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing remarkable in his taking a stroll at night to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out Marley's name above the warehouse door. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. But he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say,
"My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?"
Humbug.
No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked.
Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who, in a dismal little cell beyond, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. He couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room, and so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore, the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of very strong imagination, he failed.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you.
It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew.
Nah, humbug. Christmas? A humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I am sure.
I do. Merry Christmas? What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come, what right have you to be dismal? You're rich enough.
Humbug.
Oh, don't be cross, Uncle.
What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Out upon Merry Christmas? What's Christmas to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer. If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart.
Uncle!
Nephew, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine.
But you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you. Much good it has ever done you.
There are many things, Uncle, from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited. I dare say Christmas among the rest. But I have always thought of Christmas as the only time in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem, by one consent, to open up their shut-out hearts freely and to think really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not a race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold in my pocket, I believe it has done me good, and will do me good. And I say, God bless it.
Another sound from you, sir, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament.
Oh, don't be angry, Uncle. Come dine with us tomorrow.
I will. I will. I will see you in hell first.
But why, Uncle, why?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
You fell in love. Good afternoon.
Nay, Uncle, you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now? I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I am sorry, with all my heart, to find you so resolute, but I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. And so, a Merry Christmas, Uncle. Good afternoon.
Bah!
And a Happy New Year. Good afternoon.
Bah!
The clerk, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, let two people in.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years, sirs. He died 7 years ago this very night.
Well, we have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner.
Well, as this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and the destitute, who suffer greatly in this present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities, and even hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts.
Are there no prisons?
Well, yeah, plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses? They are still in operation?
They are. I wish I could say they were not.
The poor law is in full vigor, then.
It is very busy, sir.
Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
Sir, a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We chose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. Now, what shall we put you down for?
Nothing.
Of course, you wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone. Since you asked me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I do not make merry myself at Christmas, and I cannot afford to make idle people merry. I hope to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, sir, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. It is not my business, sirs. It is enough for a man to understand his own business, and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon.
Seeing it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened. The cold became intense, piercing, searching, biting cold.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay.
Humbug!
Yes, sir. Merry Christmas, sir.
At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
If quite convenient, sir.
It is not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to keep half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
But, sir, it's only once a year.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. Be here all the earlier next morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, went down a slide on Corn Hill at the end of a lane of boys 20 times, in honor of its being Christmas Eve. and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to play at blind man's bluff.
Scrooge took his dinner and went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner, a gloomy set of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing hide-and-seek with the other houses, and forgotten its way out again. Nobody lived in it but Scrooge.
Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning.
Also that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London.
Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his dead partner that afternoon.
And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, not a knocker, but Marley's face.
Marley's face. It has a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. But as Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again.
Bah!
He fastened the door, walked across the hall and up the stairs. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his door, he walked through his rooms. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, and nobody under the bed. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Putting on his dressing gown, slippers, and nightcap, he sat down before the fire. The fireplace was an old one, built by some Dutch merchant and paved all around with quaint Dutch tiles, designed to illustrate the scriptures. There were Cains and Abels, Pharaoh's daughters, queens of Sheba, apostles putting off to sea in butterboats.
Humbug.
His glance happened to rest upon a bell that hung in the room, and as he looked, this bell began to swing. Soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. The bells ceased as they had begun.
They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain. The cellar door flew open, and then he heard the noise much louder, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door.
Bah! I don't believe it.
His color changed, though, when, without a pause, it came through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes.
Marley's ghost. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, waistcoat, tights, and boots. The chain he drew was wound about him like a tail made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, and heavy purses. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge could see the two buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Marley's voice, no doubt about it.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who were you then? You are particular for a shade.
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. You don't believe in me.
I don't.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing can affect them. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of the grave about you, whatever you are.
Oh!
At this, the spirit shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon.
But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round its head, its lower jaw dropped down upon its breast.
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world, oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness.
You are fettered, Jacob. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will. Is its pattern strange to you? Or would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full as heavy and long 7 Christmas Eves ago, and you have labored on it since. Oh, it is a ponderous chain.
Oh, speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give, nor can I tell you what I would. I cannot rest. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. My spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me.
7 years dead, and traveling all that time?
The whole time, no rest, no peace.
You travel fast?
On the wings of the wind, 7 year, captive bound and double-ironed.
But you were a good man of business, Jacob.
Business? Mankind was my business. Charity, mercy, and benevolence were all my business. At this time of the year I suffer most. Hear me, my time is nearly gone. How is it that I appear before you, I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day.
It was not an agreeable idea.
I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring.
You were always a good friend, Jacob.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the hope you mentioned, Jacob? I think I'd rather not.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I now tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1. Expect the second, the next night, at the same hour.
Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over?
The third, upon the next night of the last stroke of 12. Look to see me no more, and look that, for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us.
The apparition walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window behind raised itself a little till it was wide open. Scrooge became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful. The specter joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window.
The air was filled with phantoms, ghosts of departed usurers, wandering hither and thither and moaning as they went. Every one wore chains. Some few were linked together. None were free. Many had been known to Scrooge. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat with a monstrous iron safe attached to its ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant. The misery with them all was that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, but had lost the power forever.
Whether these creatures faded into mist or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell, but they and their spirit voices faded together.
Scrooge closed the window, and being, from the emotion he had undergone, or his glimpse of the invisible world, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant.
Stave 2.
12 o'clock? Impossible. Jacob Marley? Was it a dream? A visitation when the bell tolls 1.
It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. It wore a tunic of purest white.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?
I am. I am the ghost of Christmas past.
What business brings you here?
Your welfare.
Much obliged. Perhaps an unbroken rest might have served me better.
Your reclamation, then. Come, walk with me.
The spirit moved to the window.
But the weather, the hour, I might fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand, and you will be upheld in more than this.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand. It was a clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground.
Where are you leading me?
He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes long, long forgotten.
Good heavens! I was a boy here.
You remember the way?
Remember, I could walk it blindfold.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years.
They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in country gigs driven by farmers.
Merry Christmas! Hurry, hurry! Merry Christmas!
All were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it.
These are but shadows of things that have been. They have no consciousness of us. The school is not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still.
I know.
They left the high road and soon approached a mansion of dull red brick, a large house of broken fortunes, offices little used, windows broken. They entered the dreary hall to a door at the back. It opened before them and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made bare still by lines of plain desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire.
I wish...
What do you wish?
Nothing. There was a girl singing at my door last night.
Let us see another Christmas.
Scrooge's former self grew larger. The room became darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk, the windows cracked, fragments of plaster fell. There he was, alone again, while the other boys had gone home for the holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down. Scrooge glanced anxiously toward the door. It opened, and a girl came darting in and put her arms about his neck and kissed him.
Dear, dear brother, I've come to bring you home, dear brother. To bring you home.
Home? Home, little fan?
Yes, home for good and all. Home forever and ever. Father is so pleased and so much kinder than he used to be that home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should. And he sent me in a coach to bring you, and you're never to come back here. But first, we're going to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in the world.
You are quite a woman, little fan.
A delicate creature, but she had a large heart.
So she had. I will not gainsay it, spirit.
She died a woman and had, as I think, children.
One child. Fred.
Although they had, but at that moment, left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city. It was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a warehouse door.
Was I apprenticed here?
They went in, the sight of a gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind a high desk.
Why, it's old Fezziwig, bless his heart. Is Fezziwig alive again?
Yo ho there, Ebenezer, Dick.
Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow prentice.
Dick Wilkins, to be sure.
No more work tonight, boys. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Shutters up.
They charged into the street with the shutters, had them up in their places, barred them and pinned them, and then came back panting like racehorses.
Hilly ho, boys. Clear way, lads.
There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away. It was done in a minute. The floor was swept, the lamps trimmed, fuel heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night.
In came a fiddler and went up to the desk and made an orchestra of it and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way. In they all came, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly. Away they all went, 20 couple at once.
There were dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was negus, and there was cold roast, and there was cold boiled, and there were mince pies, and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came when the fiddler struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig, as to her she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. And if that's not high praise, tell me higher and I shall use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone through the dance, advance and retire, both hands to partner, bow and curtsy, thread the needle, and back again, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs.
When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and, shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out,
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, sir. Merry
Good night.
Christmas.
wished him or her a Merry Christmas, and thus the cheerful voices died away.
A small matter to make these silly folk so full of gratitude.
Small.
Is it not? He has but spent a few pounds of your mortal money. Is that so much that he deserves such praise?
Bah, it isn't that spirit. Why, he has the power to render us happy or unhappy. His power lies in words and looks. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. Why,
What is the matter?
nothing again. I should like to be able to say a word to my clerk just now. That's all.
Scrooge and the ghost again stood in the open air.
My time grows short.
Again, Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was a restless motion in the eye.
He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in whose eyes there were tears.
It matters little to you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no cause to grieve.
What idol has displaced you?
A golden one.
Belle, such is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty. Yet there is nothing it condemns with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
You fear the world too much, Ebenezer. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion gain engrosses you.
And if I have grown, what then? I am not changed towards you, am I?
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so until we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man.
Man, I was a boy.
Your own feeling tells you you were not what you now are. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you.
Belle, have I sought release?
In words, no.
In what then?
In a changed nature, an altered spirit, in everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. Tell me, if this had never been between us, would you seek me out, a dowerless girl, and try to win me now? No.
You think not?
Heaven knows I would gladly think otherwise if I could. I release you, Ebenezer, with a full heart, for the love of him you once were. You may, the memory of what is past half makes me hope you will, have pain in this, a very brief time, and then you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly as an unprofitable dream from which it happened well that you awoke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Spirit, show me no more. Remove me from this place.
These were shadows of things that have been, that they are what they are. Do not blame me.
Haunt me no longer.
Scrooge observed that the spirit's light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguisher cap, and by a sudden action pressing it down upon its head. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted. In his own bedroom, he had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Stave 3. Now Scrooge was ready for a broad field of strange appearances. Nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him. But being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing. And consequently, when the clock struck 1 and no shape appeared, but only a ghostly light, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling.
Strange. Where is it coming from?
He began to think that the source and secret of the light might be in the adjoining room from whence it seemed to shine. He got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door.
Enter Scrooge.
It was his own room. There was no doubt about that. But it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. Crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there, and a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney.
Heaped on the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, great joints of meat, sucking pigs,
Wreaths of sausages,
mince pies,
plum puddings,
barrels of oysters,
red hot chestnuts,
cherry-cheeked apples,
juicy oranges,
luscious pears,
immense 12th cakes, and seething bowls of punches that made the chamber dim with their steam.
An easy stayed upon this couch, there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge.
Come in, man, and know me better. I am the ghost of Christmas present.
It was clothed in one simple green robe, bordered with white fur. Its feet were bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath set with shining icicles.
You've never seen the like of me before?
Never.
Never walked with the younger members of my family?
I don't think I have. Have you had many brothers, Spirit?
More than 1,800.
A tremendous family. Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night and learnt a lesson. If you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
Scrooge did as he was told, and held it fast, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning. The sky was gloomy, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad. For the people shoveling away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another and now and then exchanging a facetious snowball, laughing heartily if it went right, and not less heartily if it went wrong. The poulterers' shops were still open, and the fruiterers were radiant in their glory. There were great round, pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts, shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen, lolling at the door and tumbling out into the street.
There were ruddy, brown-faced onions winking from their shelves in wanton slyness at the girls as they went by and glanced demurely at the hung-up mistletoe.
There were pears and apples clustered high in blooming pyramids.
There were bunches of grapes.
There were piles of filberts.
There were Norfolk biffins, squab and swarthy, setting off the yellow of the oranges and lemons, and urgently entreating to be carried home in paper bags.
And the grocers, oh, the grocers! It was not alone that the scales descending on the counter made a merry sound,
Or that the twine and roller parted company so briskly,
or that the blended scents of tea and coffee were so grateful to the nose,
or that the raisins were so plentiful,
the almonds so extremely white,
the sticks of cinnamon so long and straight,
the candied fruits so caked and spotted with molten sugar.
and the customers, all so eager they tumbled up against each other at the door, crashing their wicker baskets wildly, and left their purchases upon the counter and came running back to fetch them, and committed hundreds of the little-like mistakes in the best humor possible. And soon the steeples called good people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and their gayest faces, and at the same time there emerged from the scores of by-streets innumerable people carrying their dinners to the bakers' shops. These poor revelers appeared to interest the Spirit very much, for he stood with Scrooge in a baker's doorway, and taking off the covers as their bearers passed, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch. It was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice, when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled each other,
What? I beg your pardon.
I beg your pardon, ma'am.
he shed a few drops on them, and their good humor was restored.
After you, my good woman.
No, after you.
Oh, let me help you with that. Oh, it's heavy. What's in it?
Pies.
Pies. What kind?
Mince, apple, pear, prune, quince.
Quince, I say.
For they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day, and so it was. God love it, so it was.
Spirit, is there a peculiar flavor in what you sprinkle from your torch?
There is. It's my own.
Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?
To any kindly given, to a poor one most.
Why to a poor one most?
Because it needs it most.
They went on, invisible, into the suburbs of the town. to Scrooge's clerks. And on the threshold of the door, the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling. Bob had but 15 bob a week himself. He pocketed on Saturdays but 15 copies of his Christian name. And yet the ghost of Christmas present blessed his 4-roomed house.
Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap, and make a goodly show for a sixpence. And she laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes. And now 2 smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose and known it for their own.
Whatever has got your precious father, then, and your brother, Tiny Tim, and Martha weren't as late as last Christmas Day by half an hour.
Here's Martha, Mother.
Why, bless your heart, how late you are.
We had a bit of work to do last night, and we had to finish up this morning.
Well, never mind. So as long as you'll come, sit down before the fire, me dear, and have a warm.
No, here's Father coming. I'd, Martha, I'd.
So Martha hid herself, and in came Bob, the father, with 3 feet of comforter hanging down before him, his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Tiny Tim bore a little crutch, and his limbs supported by an iron frame.
Why, where's our Martha?
Not coming, Father.
Not coming? Not coming on Christmas Day?
Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, even if it were only in joke, so she came out from behind the closet door and ran into his arms, and young Peter bore Tiny Tim off into the wash-house that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper.
And how did Tim behave?
As good as gold and better. He gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember on Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
The young Cratchits went to the bakery to fetch the goose, and soon returned in high procession. Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy, Master Peter mashed the potatoes, Miss Belinda sweetened the applesauce, Martha dusted the plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner of the table, and the 2 young Cratchits set chairs for everybody. At last, the dishes were set, and grace was said.
Amen.
It was succeeded by a breathless pause as Mrs. Cratchit, after looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. And when she did...
There never was such a goose. I don't believe there ever was such a goose.
Its tenderness and flavor, size and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family, and the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onion.
And now Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witnesses, to take the pudding up and bring it in. Hello, with a great deal of steam, like a speckled cannonball blazing in ignited brandy, and with Christmas holly stuck into the top.
A wonderful pudding, my dear. Your greatest success since our marriage.
Coo!
Nobody thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been heresy to do so.
At last the dinner was done, the cloth cleared, apples and oranges put upon the table, and a shovelful of chestnuts on the fire, and all the family drew round the hearth.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
Tim sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool, and Bob held his withered little hand in his.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the chimney corner and a crutch without an owner. If these shadows remain unaltered, the child will die.
No, say he will be spared.
If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
Founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast on.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
It must be Christmas Day, on which one drinks the health of such an unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Christmas Day. I'll drink his health for your sake, not for his. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from waterproof. Their clothes were scanty, but they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another. And when they faded, Scrooge has his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim until the last.
Intermission.
By this time it was getting dark and snowing heavily, and as Scrooge and the spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens and parlors was wonderful. Here, the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cozy dinner.
There, all the children of the house were running out into the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, and aunts.
And here were guests assembling.
And there, a group of handsome girls, all hooded and fur-booted, all chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some neighbor's house, where woe upon the single man who saw them enter. Artful witches, well they knew it, in a glow.
And now, without a word of warning, they stood upon a desert moor, where masses of rude stones were cast about, as though it were a burial place of giants.
What place is this?
Where miners live, who labor in the bowels of the earth. They know me.
A light shone from the window of a hut, passing through the wall of mud and stone. They found a cheerful company assembled round a glowing fire, an old man and woman with their children and their children's children, and another generation beyond that, all decked out in their holiday attire. They were singing a Christmas song, and all joined in the chorus.
Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
The Spirit did not tarry here.
Whoa, not to see, Spirit. Not to see? A lighthouse.
Merry Christmas!
What's that?
I said Merry Christmas!
What?
Merry Christmas!
Oh, Merry Christmas!
Good King Wenceslas looked out
On the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even.
Again the ghosts sped on, above the black and heaving, until far away from any shore they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel, and the lookout in the bow, the officers who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures in their several stations, but every man among them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke to his companion of some bygone Christmas day with the homeward hopes belonging to it. And every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had a kinder word for another on that day than any other day in the year, and remembered those he cared for at a distance, and had known that they remembered him.
It was a great surprise to Scrooge to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise for Scrooge to recognize it as his nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room. And if you should happen, by any unlikely chance, to know a man more blessed in a laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is, I should like to know him too.
It's true. He said Christmas was a humbug. As I live, he believed it too.
Well, more the shame for him, Fred.
Scrooge's niece. Bless those women. They never do anything by halves. They are always in earnest.
He is a comical old fellow, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I'm sure I have nothing to say against him.
And I'm sure he's very rich. At least you always tell me so.
Yes, my dear, but his wealth is of no use to him.
Well,
He doesn't do any good with it.
I have no patience with him.
Oh, I have. I feel sorry for him, and couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself always. If he'd take it into his head to dislike us, and won't come and dine with us, what's the consequence? True, he doesn't lose much of a dinner.
Indeed. I think he loses a very good dinner.
And I'm very glad to hear it. And I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it if he finds me going there, in good temper, year after year, saying, Uncle Scrooge, how are you? And if it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50, that's something.
After tea, they had more music and played forfeits, for it is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. There was Blind Man's Bluff and mistletoe. Scrooge begged like a little boy to be allowed to stay until the guests departed.
What half-hour spirit?
It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something and the rest must find out what, he only answering yes or no. An animal, a live animal, a disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted, and lived in London, and walked the streets, but was not a horse or a donkey or a cow, or a bull or a tiger or a dog, or a pig or a cat or a bear?
Fred, I know. It's your Uncle Scrooge.
Well, he has given us plenty of merriment this day, and it would be ungrateful not to drink to his health. To my Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge.
The scene passed in the breath of the last word, and they were again upon their travels. It was a long night, and strange, too, in that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older.
Are spirits' lives so short?
My life is brief. It ends tonight.
Forgive me. I see something strange protruding from your skirt. Is that a foot or a claw?
Look here.
From the folding of its robe, it brought two children, wretched, hideous.
A boy and a girl, yellow, ragged, wolfish, where youth should have filled their features, a stale and shriveled hand had pinched and twisted them. Where angels might have sat, enthroned devils lurked and glared out menacing.
Are they yours?
They are mankind's. The boy is ignorance, the girl is want. Beware them both, but most beware the boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom.
Have they no refuge?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
Stave 4.
Scrooge lifted his eyes and beheld a solemn phantom. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. O Spirit, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, I am prepared to bear you company. Will you not speak to me? Lead on.
The phantom moved away. The city seemed to spring up about them. They were on the exchange amongst the merchants.
No, I don't know much about it. Yeah, I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
I thought he'd never die. What was the matter with him?
Lord knows.
What has he done with his money?
Well, he hasn't left it to me, that's all I know. It'll be a cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know anyone who'll go to it.
Well, I don't mind going if a lunch is provided, but I must be fed.
The phantom glided on into a street. Its finger pointed to two persons.
How are you?
How are you?
Well, old Scratch got his own at last, hey?
So I'm told. Cold, isn't it?
Christmas. You're not a skater, I suppose.
Oh, no.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Scrooge was surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations so trivial. They left and went into an obscure part of the town, the ways foul and narrow, alleys and archways like so many cesspools.
Far in this din, there was a low-browed, beetling shop, where old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Upon the floor were piled heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in was old Joe.
Let the charwoman to be the first. Let the laundress to be the second. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance.
You couldn't have met in a better place. Come into the parlor. We're all suitable to our calling. Come into the parlor.
The woman who had spoken threw her bundle on the floor.
What odds then, Mrs. Dilber? Every person has a right to take care of themselves.
He always did.
That's true indeed. No man more so.
Who's the wiser, eh?
None indeed.
Who's the worse for the loss of a few things? Not a dead man, eh?
No, indeed. He wanted to keep him after he was dead, the old screw. Why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd had somebody to look after him when he was struck, instead of gasping out his last all alone.
Truest word as ever was spoke. It's a judgment on him, it is.
Open that bundle, Joe. Let me know the value of it. Speak out plain now.
It was not extensive, a seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons.
Sheets, towels, 2 silver teaspoons, sugar tongs. Well, here you are then. I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine. That's on your account.
Now my bundle, Joe.
Joe dragged out her large and heavy roll.
What do you call this then? This bed curtains? You don't mean to say you took him down with him still lying there?
Yes, I do. And why not?
You were born to make your fortune, and you'll certainly do it.
I shan't hold back me hand when I can get anything by reaching it out. Now, don't drop that wax on his blankets.
His blankets?
Whose else? He isn't likely to take cold anymore, is he?
I hope he didn't die of anything catching.
Don't you be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company what I'd loit about him. And you may look through his shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What do you call wasting it?
Putting it on him to be buried in. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off him again.
Oh. I see, Spirit. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. Merciful heaven.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room.
Is it good or bad?
Oh, it's bad.
We're ruined?
Oh, there's hope yet, Caroline.
If he relents, nothing is past hope.
He's past relenting, my dear. He's dead.
Oh, thank God. Forgive me.
What the woman said was true. He was not only ill, but dying.
To whom will our debt be transferred?
I don't know. But before that time, we'll be ready with the money. And even we were not, it would be bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline.
Yes.
Oh, Spirit, let me see some tenderness connected with death.
The ghost conducted him through several streets. They entered Bob Cratchit's house and found Peter reading to the mother and children seated around the fire.
And he took a child and set him in the midst of them.
Where have I heard those words?
Oh, this color hurts me eyes, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home. It must be nearest time now.
Pass it, Mother. I think he walks a little slower than he used these last few evenings.
Oh, I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed. He was very light to carry, and his father loved him so. It was no trouble. Oh, but there he is.
His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it most.
Well, look at the work upon this table. You'll be done long before Sunday.
You went again today, then, Robert?
How green a place it is, but you'll see it often. I promised him that we would walk there on a Sunday.
Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew Fred, who, meeting him in the street that day, inquired,
I am heartily sorry for it, he said, and sorry for your good wife. Although how he knew that, I don't know.
Knew what, my dear?
Why, that you were a good wife.
Everybody knows that, Father.
Well, I hope they do, my boy. If I can be of service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that's where I live. It seemed almost as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. And I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation.
Hear that, Peter?
Oh, and then Peter will be setting up house and living with someone, going to see someone.
It's as likely as not, one of these days. But however and whenever we part from one another, we shall none of us forget Tiny Tim, or this first parting that there was among us. And when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, we shall not quarrel easily amongst ourselves, eh?
No, never, Father.
I am very happy.
they reached an iron gate.
Spectre, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand.
A churchyard, overrun by grass and weeds, choked up with too much burying. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one.
Spirit, before I draw near to the stone, to which you point, one question. Are these the shadow of things that will be, or shadow of things that may be? Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if persevered in, they must lead, but if the course be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus. Say it is thus with what you show me. Ebenezer Scrooge. Was I? Am I that man? No! Spirit! No! Spirit, hear me! I am not that man I was. I will not be the man I have been. I will honor Christmas and keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three will strive within me. Oh, tell me, I may sponge away the writing on this stone. Oh, Spirit!
He caught the spectral hand, the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into...
Stave 5.
A bedpost. Mine own. Yes, this bed is my own. This room best. The time before me is my own. To make amends, I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm light as a feather. There's the door. Jacob entered. There's the corner where the ghost sat. There's the window where I saw the spirits. It's all true. It all happened.
It was a splendid laugh, an illustrious laugh, the father of a long line of brilliant laughs.
Oh, I don't know what day it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Hello?
He was checked by the churches ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clang, ding, dong, bell.
Glorious. You there, boy. What's today?
Eh?
What's today, my fine fellow?
Why, it's Christmas Day.
I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. Well, of course, they can do anything they like. My boy, do you know the poulterers in the next street at the corner?
I should hope I did.
A remarkable boy. My young sir, do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging there?
What, the one as big as me?
What a delightful boy, yes.
It's hanging there now.
Go and buy it.
Oh, come.
Tell them to bring it here, that I may give them direction where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. In less than 5 minutes, a half a crown.
The boy was off like a shot.
I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. You shan't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim.
The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat in his chair again and chuckled till he cried.
He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got into the streets. The people were pouring forth, and Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile. He had not gone far when he beheld the good people who had walked into his counting house the day before.
My dear friends, a Merry Christmas to you.
Mr. Scrooge?
That is my name. I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and would you have the goodness to take...
Lord bless me. My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious? I don't know what to say to such munificence.
Don't say anything, but come and see me. Will you come and see me? Thank you.
He went to church and watched the people and patted children on the head. In the afternoon,
Is your master at home, my dear?
Yes, sir, in the dining room, sir, along with the mistress.
Thank you. He knows me. I'll go in. Fred,
Bless my soul.
there's your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
let him in? It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful happiness.
Scrooge was early at the office next morning. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob.
Sir, what do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I am.
Step this way, sir, if you please.
Well, it's only once a year, sir.
I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, sir. And therefore, Mr. Cratchit, I am afraid I must insist upon raising your salary. A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas than I have given you many a year. I will raise your salary and assist your family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl. Now, Bob, I order you to make up the fires and go buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. To Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man as the good old city knew. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. May that be truly said of us, and all of us.
And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us.
Everyone.